A heretic is a person who commits a thought crime. Last week, we discussed the Cathars and how they were persecuted by the Catholic Church. In fact, the Catholic Church started the whole Inquisition to go after heretics, to go after the Cathars, these people who were not practicing Catholicism correctly, who had their own interpretation, who were committing thought crimes. Now, we no longer live under the rule of the Catholic Church. This isn't 1200. We can believe what we want. Can we really? Can we really? Now, that having been said, some heresies, some thought crimes can be very dangerous. Ideas are like viruses, and not all ideas are good ideas. Not all heresies are good heresies. However, we have been taught, we have been led to believe that we have absolute free speech, we can think and say whatever we like. We now know that that is not true. We've learned that in the past 10 years or so with social media. Some jokes are inappropriate, some words are inappropriate, some lines of thinking are simply inappropriate. And we don't have the tools, most of us don't have the tools to understand that what these people are doing, these people are committing heresies. These people are committing thought crimes. Now, back in the 1200s, back with the Cathars, you could be persecuted for being a heretic, for going against the church. But you could also be persecuted for supporting those people, for not turning those people in. And so in this way, the heretic was isolated from the community. The community was turned against this individual. The levers of power were used in all sorts of ways. They could physically arrest that person for being a heretic, but they could also turn the minds of the community against that person and let the community, the mob, however you want to call it, let them do the dirty work. And we see that this happens very often now. I mean, why go through all the work when you can just make someone else do it for you? And not only make someone else do it for you, but make them think that it was their idea. It's their idea to persecute the heretic. It's their idea to go against the person who is committing the thought crime, who's saying the wrong thing, who's committing wrong think. It's their idea. It's the mob's idea. There's no force from on top directing this mob. No. The mob itself. The community polices itself. Well, yes and no. A community does police itself. A community selects its leaders, and so a community does police itself in this way. But really, what is happening is the community is so afraid of being perceived as a heretic themselves that they turn against the person, scapegoat this person. So a scapegoat is a person that has to bear the sins of others. It comes from this goofy religious superstitious thing where they put all of the town's sins on a goat and then drove it out because people are ridiculous. Check out that Death to Smarty Pants video that I did a few years back. It talks about 5 individuals who practiced heresy and were killed for it or were imprisoned for it. I included Galileo, who was not necessarily killed, but he was imprisoned and he had to spend the rest of his life in a miserable state. And all he did was say, hey, Jupiter has moons. And the church said, no, you will not do that. But it's not just the church. That video includes 5 different people from Puritan New England. We had the Catholic Church. We also had the USSR. This isn't unique to any particular group. In fact, that's what's scary about it, is that it's part of group dynamics. To isolate the heretic, it shows that the group has a cohesive train of thought. This is what we think. And if somebody says something that's not what you think, you do have to point out, well, this is not what we're thinking. And there comes a certain point, especially in religion, where if a person thinks so differently from the group, well, they're not really following that religion. So there is a very useful function of isolating the heretic. There's a very useful function of deciding what is the thought that they all hold, what is the ideology, and what is not the ideology. So there's a lot of gray area here. It's not just black and white. Group leaders, thought leaders, they do feel that they have to purge the group of harmful ideas. And to a certain extent, this is true. Now, what that purging entails varies quite a bit. Some people just say, hey, that's not what we think, or hey, that contradicts this passage in the Bible. Okay, fine. Others take it too far. Maybe they took it too far in the Inquisition. They burned a lot of people at the stake for heresy. Luckily, we don't do that anymore. I think the worst thing that can happen right now is you lose your job and you get sued. Okay, it's not being burned at a stake, so that's a step up. The village isn't going to come together and stone you, so that's a step up. It also, and this is very, very dark, but this is how groups work. Sometimes the group needs a common enemy, and sometimes there is no outer group. So sometimes they have to find one within their ranks and attack that particular person. And this also adds to group cohesion because they have a common enemy. Now, don't confuse this necessarily with the Inquisition going after the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they were more of an out group. It was us against them. Now, we're going to go into this next week when we talk about the Inquisition, but the Jews that the Catholic Church attacked were called conversos, which means they had converted to Catholicism, but were secretly practicing the Judaic religion. Okay, not all of them, but that was the charge. Attacking conversos was also a means to purge the gene pool of any Jewishness, but the authorities could say they weren't good Catholics. The official charge is actually closer to apostasy. Apostasy means to turn away from one's religion. In some places in the world, even to this day, apostasy is a capital crime. Certain religions consider apostasy a capital crime, to turn against the group entirely. That's no longer the case in the Western world. Thank God. Because a lot of us would be apostates to some group or another, and none of us want that. But we do see that apostates are attacked vehemently with groups. We have some friends of the show. Shapeshifter is one of them. They attacked Shapeshifter like you wouldn't believe. To this day, TRAs go after Shapeshifter. They say the worst things about them. Also, Monia Ali, she is our fandom expert. We love Monia. Monia started as a heretic. She said, what did she say? She said, I don't think this about Harry Styles. And they were like, burn her, burn her, burn her. And then she was like, what? Well, maybe you guys are crazy in other ways too. And then she became an apostate. She went from becoming a heretic to a full-on apostate. And that's because they were crazy. Go rewatch those videos on the Harry Styles fandom, the One Direction fandom. This is why I'm glad we have laws, because they did burn people. The Catholic Church did burn people, and the way they went after Monia, they might do that if they could right now. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever look around at people and you're like, the only reason that you people aren't stoning me right now is because the law says you can't. But you would, wouldn't you? That gets in my head sometimes. When I look back at the Crucible and I look back at all these witch trials, I'm thinking, a lot of y'all would have burned me if you could. And if you lived through 2021, you know what I'm talking about. So let's move on. So we've learned, what's our vocabulary that we've learned? We've learned heretic. We've learned apostate. Heretic's actually really interesting. I mentioned this last week, but the etymology of heretic, it comes from the Greek. And in the Greek, I love Greek etymology because it's just the word we have now plus os. So it's heretikos. Anyway, that means to choose, one who chooses. It doesn't mean to choose wrong. It just means to choose, and you're not supposed to choose. The choice is supposed to have been made for you, especially with the church. Now, the Romans took that in the Latin, and they used it to say this is a sect, a philosophical sect, and then that got taken and switched up to this is a heretic as we know it now, a person who is committing a thought crime. And don't take this video as me attacking the group dynamics, as me even making any value judgment over how people deal with heretics at all. Because think about this, 1918, the Russian Revolution, the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks who took over, they were heretics. And you know what? They were dangerous. They were very dangerous. The Bolsheviks were committing thought crimes that would lead to the deaths of millions and millions of people. So it's hard to say it's wrong to persecute heretics. We don't do it now, but it's hard to say it's absolutely wrong to persecute heretics because sometimes you need to. Like in 1918 Russia, they should have persecuted those heretics a little bit more. Maybe their entire empire wouldn't have been dragged down. Now, I also had another good example. What was it? What was my other example? Ooh, I remembered later. It was Saddam Hussein who murdered Islamic extremists. And then when we got rid of him, we got ISIS. So this is just how the sausage gets made. Sometimes you got to kill a few heretics. Like, I'm just saying. Also, check out Prophets of Doom by Dan Carlin. It's about Protestant heretics during the Reformation. A lot of them were raving lunatics, dangerous raving lunatics. So ideas can be very dangerous. Let's not be naive about this. Now, that having been said, ideologies do grow through heresies. When people have new thoughts and contribute to the ideology, they can help evolve the ideology so it can grow over time. So, heretics are dangerous. Heretics are helpful. It's complicated. And we hope that the bad ideas will simply lose in the marketplace of ideas. We hope that we can put all the ideas out there and the good ones will win out and the bad ones will lose, and that is that. But what we have seen in our lifetimes and in history is that that is just not true. The marketplace of ideas is a Ross. It's not a Nordstrom's. There's no one cleaning up. There's no one putting things back on the shelves. It's a mess. You throw it all out there and it's every man for himself. Have you ever tried to shop in a Ross? You don't know if you're going to come out with an outfit. You don't know what you're going to come out with. You better not be shopping for anything specific because you might not get that dress. Such is the marketplace of ideas. Sometimes the best idea does not win out. We cannot trust it to win out. What wins out is often the loudest voices and the ideas that have the power and authority behind them. It's sad. I wish that weren't true, but that's just true. It's what we have seen. We can't deny what we've seen with our eyes. That's silly. That is silly. And if these ideas do lose out, if these ideas do in fact not gel with reality, it might not happen in our lifetime. It might take hundreds of years for bad ideas to lose out. So what do? Do you, from a central authority, go and attack these ideas that you consider bad? And what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? The Inquisition was wrong when it burned Bruno. It was wrong. Who decides which ideas are good and which ideas are bad? Oh, I wish this were easier. I wish I could tell you that there's a simple solution and how we can decide which heretical ideas will eventually be helpful and which ones are going to hurt us, but I can't. And what makes it more complicated? What makes it more complicated still is this. We have heretics. We have people who choose these certain ideas, who commit the thought crimes because they come from a good place. They genuinely want to think outside the box. They genuinely want to contribute to the collective consciousness. They genuinely want to see the human noosphere grow. Noosphere is a concept. It's basically another dimension in which it's our minds. It's our minds and it's our shared reality. It's from a person called Pierre Desjardins. That's how you gotta say it. He was actually a heretic in the Catholic Church as well. And he waited until he was about to die to publish this because he knew it was heretical. I think he predicted the noosphere. Of course, there were other people too, but what we would consider the noosphere is the online sphere. It's just a realm of thought that has been made real through technology. So this is actually similar to the Black Iron Prison. Check out that video. Is this world a prison? I don't know. Bringing it back to the point, Maya, what was your point? It was this, that there are some heretics who genuinely want to contribute to the noosphere. But there are some people who are contrarians. We don't have a problem with contrarians. I probably have a contrarian bend myself. But what we have learned about contrarians is this. Some people will say no for the sake of saying no. Not because they have a good reason to say no. They just say no. Now, I thought that there were all these people, this whole community. I don't want to talk about COVID. Not today, Satan. How do I say this without talking about COVID? Somebody help me. Have you ever been against the crowd on an issue and there are people who are also against the crowd. And you're like, yes, these people are free thinkers. Yes, these people think for themselves. But then the next thing comes around and you evaluate it and you're like, well, this time the crowd isn't wrong, but they're still against the crowd. Well, why are you against the crowd this time? Well, because we're always against the crowd. These are the same people who will attack others for being NPCs. They say, they have this meme, I support the current thing. What is the current thing? You don't know what side you are on in the current thing until you evaluate it on its merits. So to just be against something, well, this person is another level of NPC, a more complicated level of NPC, perhaps, perhaps not. Still an NPC. I don't like to use the term NPC. I know it's a popular term, but I don't believe anybody is an NPC. You kind of start getting into weird territory where you start to dehumanize people, and we don't dehumanize people. It's wrong. Why? Nazis. Okay, moving on. We don't like the term NPC because it dehumanizes others. But if a person is constantly reactionary, either going along with the crowd or going against the crowd, no matter what, always doing the same thing. So a lot of actual freethinkers get confused for contrarians, and a lot of contrarians get confused for freethinkers. How's an Inquisition supposed to know the difference? Now, luckily, we do not live under the rule of the Catholic Church. We don't have to worry about the Inquisition anymore, but we still have a collective ideology, the Western ideology of freedom, of democracy, of meritocracy, and it's post-racial. We're supposed to be living in a post-racial America, whether we are, it's whatever, it's fine, it's whatever. Just don't think about it too much, okay? So we do have an ideology that we kind of live up to. We live up to it a little, but we do have a collective ideology. If you ask your standard American, if you ask any American, do you believe XYZ? Most of them will say they believe it. Whether or not they practice it, we're not even going to go into that. Now, because we have an accepted ideology, because there is an authority, well, look, we can have heretics. Whenever you have an accepted ideology, it opens the door for heretics. If you believe nothing, if anything's game, well, you can't have heretics then, can you? Because you don't have a standard ideology. You can't think outside the box if there is no box. Now, if it's every man for himself and there is no authority, well, there are no heretics either. And there are no apostates. It's no man's land. Everyone can do what they want to do. It's called gatekeeping, and gatekeeping is great at keeping Nazis out. But gatekeeping goes too far when it stops legitimate discussion. Lab leak discussion. This isn't torture, it's gatekeeping. TERFs are all heretics. Trans, exclusionary, reactionary feminists. These are all heretics. They're women. That's the feminist part. They're women, and they don't go along with what feminists are supposed to think. So they're considered heretics. They are a group of heretics. Now, the detrans community, Shapeshifter is among the detrans community. They are part of the detrans community. Detrans are apostates. They must be stoned. You stone an apostate. You got to make an example. You have to make an example. Yeah, and unfortunately, violence or the threat of violence is a tried and true way of enforcing bad ideas. That's why apostates are stoned, why gang members who leave are executed, why conversos were burned. The apostate is extra dangerous because they know all the tea too. Do you know who else is a famous apostate? Malcolm X. Malcolm X. He went on pilgrimage and he came back saying, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. We all worship the same God and we can all worship him together. He left the corrupt Nation of Islam like the Protestants left the corrupt Catholic Church, and they killed him. They killed him. So we're not going to turn this into a Malcolm X stand video, but he was an apostate. It's a good quote I found from my boo Frederick Douglass. He doesn't know he's my boo, but I'm gonna call him my boo anyway. He's been dead for like 200 years. He's like, who is he? Who is this girl? Whatever. Who is you? I don't know you. I am dead. Can you please stop seancing me? Anyway, Frederick Douglass said, liberty is meaningless where the rights to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist. That, of all rights, is the dread of tyrants. It is the right which they first of all strike down. 2020 was not 1860. People were silenced by more insidious means these past 2 years. Social media group dynamics was weaponized against the people who committed thought crimes. What I am not going to do is give a full-on history of Christianity. Not going to happen. However, a few hundred years after the Cathars, there was the Protestant Reformation. So the Protestants said, I'm not listening to you, Catholic Church. And they, as a group, broke off. And that's kind of what we're seeing now, is we have red versus blue. Red team versus blue team. Is it tedious? Are you tired of it yet? I'm tired of it. That's fine. That's fine. The Catholic Church called all of the Protestants heretics. They called them all heretics. But luckily, the Protestants had certain geography. They were in a place where the Catholic Church could no longer get to them, so they could be Protestants. Now, God forbid, a Protestant crossed the Catholic Church's path, the Inquisition's path, and got into their hands, then they would burn them as a heretic or try them as a heretic, etc., etc. But when there was a solid group of Protestants, the Catholic Church couldn't get to them. Now, we're kind of in a similar situation with the red versus blue, red team versus blue team. We have warring tribes now, which is an improvement on everybody attacking the heretic. For the heretic, at least. Maybe not for society because of the 30 Years' War, and then it turned into a mess, and a lot of people died. That's probably not going to happen this time, right? That's not going to happen this time. That was the last time. If you want to be a happy person, don't study history. Anyway, we are in a situation where we have two warring tribes, and so people on either of those tribes are reactionary. They just say, they go with whatever the tribe says. So if the people in power say one thing, if red is in power, blue goes against everything that they say. These are people reacting. These aren't people acting. Ugh. It's very rare to find a person who does act and doesn't simply react. And that's probably from evolutionary things. It's probably in our best interest to just go with the group, to just be in the safety of the group. So what are we going to, we're going to go against all of our evolutionary teachings? I don't know. I think right now we have to learn to do that, but I see why people just fall in line with whatever their tribe has to say. I don't know how much longer we can go with reactionary politics. I don't know how much longer we can go into this tribalism because, like, look, the things are falling apart. You know what I mean? Like, the infrastructure is crumbling. The kids are really dumb. Everybody's fat and unhealthy and miserable, depressed and on drugs. I don't know how much longer we can just go blaming other people rather than making an effort to solve the problems with the facts that are available. So I get it. I get it. We have to go with our tribe and we have to feel safe with the tribe. But also, why can't we have a bullet train that goes from New York to California? Like, every other country can do that and we can't do that. So it's gotten to the point where it's actually handicapping us. And we need to move past it. We need to move past it. And I'm confident we can move past it. It's just right now it's going to be pretty hard. Right now it's going to be hard to move past that because there is no protection for the heretic, the person who is against everything. There's no protection for these people. If you don't fall in line with a tribe, there's no one to come out and speak for you. Why come out and do this? Why would we have free thinkers? Maybe we as a country don't deserve them. We really have to take a look in the mirror and say, do we deserve any better than we have? Are we protecting people who come out and say the right thing? Or are we ourselves quiet because we don't want people to say that we're heretics too? That's the problem. Remember, we talked about this at the very beginning of the video, that the Inquisition would attack the heretic, one, but anybody who protected the heretic also got attacked. So people don't want to come out and say, well, I think this person is right. I think they're right on this. They just keep their mouth shut and they let them all attack this person. Well, maybe the group gets what it deserves. The good news. Is there any good news? This all seems miserable. Well, the good news is nobody is being burned at the stake. Shut this video off right now if you want to leave on a high note. So nobody's being burned at the stake. However, if they can push this social credit score through, A lot of you are like, they'll never do that. That's just a conspiracy theory. Well, what's going on with PayPal then? The misinformation fine, what's going on with that? The PayPal misinformation story is actually interesting. It's a long story. I don't really want to go into it right now, but they put something in their terms of service, which basically said they could find you for misinformation. Now, fact checkers have said this is not true, but Forbes doesn't seem to be buying that. So let's go with the money people for now. If they can push this through, if they want to push it through, who knows if they want to push it through? They do in China. Maybe the United States isn't China. Maybe the United States will stand up for our rights. We'll stand up for what is right and defend our ideology. No, everybody wants a new McDonald's Happy Meal. That is not going to happen, okay? If the powers that be want to push the social credit score through, look around at all these people. Do you think they're going to stop it, or do you think they're going to line up for a McDonald's Happy Meal? Think about it. If they want to push that through, we might be kind of back in burned at the stake territory. Burned at the stake adjacent. It's burned at the stake adjacent. Just a warning. So it actually does matter. It does matter that we defend the heretic when they speak out. And I'm trying to be sympathetic. I'm trying to be as sympathetic as I possibly can be because we're living in very uncertain times, and that is frightening to people. It's causing a lot of fear. Definitely check out that video, Millennial Life of Chaos. So I want to be sympathetic that when we live in such uncertainty, sometimes it provides the illusion of certainty to attack the heretic. And so that perhaps could be one of the reasons that we're seeing more attacks on thought crimes now. Honestly, most people don't like to have their ideas threatened because they can't defend their ideas. Somebody else told them these ideas and they're repeating them. They didn't think about them. They didn't think them through. If you ask them about it, they can't tell you why they believe this or why they should believe this over something else. They really can't defend their ideas. So they become very hostile to someone who attacks their ideas, which is sad. It's sad. Let's be honest. It would be great that if everybody repeating something actually knew what they were repeating. But as we learned with the slogans video, how they brainwash, some people just repeat slogans. And there's not much we can do about that, except educate everybody. We can educate everybody. You started laughing. No. Okay, let me defend this. Let me defend this point real quick. One way that we can teach society how to deal with ideas is by asking questions. And a very famous man did this, a famous man by the name of Socrates. And once he asked those questions, he lived happily ever after. No, he didn't. Athens killed him. It didn't help. They made him drink hemlock. But still, the point stands. We can use the Socratic method to work through ideas. Subscribe.